So the next story that I'm going to bring to you today is one that I had heard probably like a year ago, and I didn't do any research, but I was on Reddit the other day looking up the name, and I came across these photos. Now, I wasn't sure if these photos were tied to the name or if they were some pseudo snuff photos that was from some movie. But after doing my research, I realized quickly that these photos, which have been out on the internet for probably over a decade, are true crime and they are uncensored. So right now I'm going to warn you, after the story, you may want to, out of curiosity, look up these photos. They're extremely graphic. As one officer explained, he has been to many crime scenes. He has seen many crime photos, but these particular photos, 1,000 times worse, he said. Now, if you're a fan of the abnormal, ominous, and bewildering delivered in a story format, I post 2 to 3 stories a week. But first, depending on what social media platform you found me, always click the like button, follow along, or subscribe. And don't forget, thank you so much. It was a humid and hot night in Detroit back in 1982, and that night was like any other night, just 3 friends hanging out, watching TV in the living room. Robert, 33, his girlfriend Janine Lynn Clark, 21, aka Charlie, and his best friend since high school, James, 37, all at Robert's apartment at 19300 block of Woodbine in Northwest Detroit. Robert's favorite TV show at the time was Benny Hill, a British comedy show seen over 130 channels around the world, mostly known for an amalgam of slapstick, burlesque, and double entendre in a format that included a live comedy and film segments. Now, James, Robert's best friend, and unbeknown to Robert, was having an affair with Robert's girlfriend, Janine, aka Charlie, behind his back. There's not a lot of backstory other than Robert grew up in an orphanage where he was abused, as it's been speculated. Later in life, this led him to go into a path of crime, and he was in and out of jail. Over time, he apparently had a reputation of being just a really bad guy. Now, his basement apartment was reported on constantly for drug and disturbance reasons. He was a biker, and he stood about 6 feet 4 inches and about 250 pounds. So he was one big dude. Now, Janine apparently ran away from home as a teenager, and she met Rob later at a dive strip club called Benson's, where a lot of bikers would hang out. The relationship lasted almost 2 years, but it was speculated he was her drug supplier / pimp, as well as her boyfriend. It later came out that she had a parole violation from a previous conviction for assisting in a bank robbery. So by no means that this was any type of Romeo and Juliet story here. Now, as far as James Glover, there's just not a lot of information. There was speculation that he believed Robert was responsible for burning his home, but again, just pure speculation. What we do know is James had health issues, and he used a cane at the time because he had bone cancer. James excused himself from the living room. He walked away slowly and with his cane and headed towards the bathroom, but once there, he veered off and went right into Robert's room. Robert was an avid gun collector, and James knew that. James, not matching Robert's big stature, he knew he couldn't take him in a fight. So James grabbed a gun and returned to the back of the couch where Robert was still sitting facing the TV. James shot Robert in the back of the head, and Robert died immediately. Now, one would think it would have stopped right there, but it didn't. What happens over the next 3 days is unbelievably disturbing and beyond comprehension. That single act began a 3-day drug-fueled and necrophiliac orgy. So James and Janine stripped Robert nude and then took turns stabbing him over 80 times. Then James left, as he wanted to chop Robert up, but didn't have a hacksaw. He went home, grabbed one from his mother's garage, and returned. They began chopping Robert up with the hacksaw. They stopped only to pose for some photos. Now, James and Janine, in this sick, twisted pair fueled on illegal substances, had also been nude throughout the entire photo series, both smiling ear to ear as they hacked up the corpse. They took the time to pose alongside Robert in various demeaning ways. One photo actually showing Robert's eventually severed head on a chair with a finger from his severed hand shoved up his nose. Another picture shows James shoving Robert's own private part that eventually gets severed into his mouth. Absolutely sick and disgusting. And yes, Janine had gone into the kitchen, had grabbed a knife, and came back and severed Robert's private part, all the while taking pictures and smiling and laughing. And I mean, absolutely bizarre. By day 3 of this whole ordeal, very little of Robert's remained intact. He had been sliced into 14 pieces, which the couple then placed into trash bags after performing various naughty acts with the remains. Though rumor had it that the pair had been caught when they took the film to be developed, the truth is that Janine cracked. She went to the police and told them what happened. It was at Robert and Janine's Detroit home that the police found the dismembered remains of Robert, along with the film roll containing photographs of the crime. According to Janine, after James shot Robert in the head, he took her captive. He fed her illegal substances and forced her to emasculate Robert, which she reluctantly complied with. The photographs of Robert with Janine and James told a very different and disturbing story to investigators. Neighbors told the local newspaper that they had also witnessed Janine leave the residence several times on her own, including once where she allegedly went to the store to purchase more film for the camera. James was eventually charged with second-degree murder, using a firearm while committing a felony, and mutilation of a corpse. Janine was originally held on parole violation, charges connected to a bank robbery she had been involved in while the investigation was still underway. Later, she was charged with mutilation of a corpse. Now, James' cancer that got aggressively worse while he was in prison, and he then ultimately died in, I think, 1984, 1985. After James underwent a psychological evaluation and was deemed fit to stand trial, he pleaded not guilty. Later, he admitted that he had held Janine captive. He was able to get a plea deal and was sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison. As for Janine, she was found guilty of mutilation of a corpse. She was sentenced to serve only 10 years. She was out in 6. Janine is still alive. She lives in Arizona and has been rearrested for minor crimes. The last thing I could find about her was 2012 for credit card theft. James's motive behind the horrific murder of Robert Beckwith has never been made public. So not only is this story horrific and demonic, and not only have there been photos for over 20 years uncensored online, that there was a movie made, and it was inspired by the 1982 Robert Beckwith case. It's called The Degenerates, and it's an ode to this pseudo snuff footage cinema. The second entry in this erotic, grotesque nonsense series showcases the exploits of a couple who recently unalived their ex-lover, and they used the body as a source of entertainment for their illegal substance-fueled honeymoon. Now, I have seen parts of it, and I have to warn you again, it's absolutely disturbing.